Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 11 about public policy. It's Lesson 11 about social policy. In this lesson, you'll learn about social policy, you'll learn about prohibiting behavior, mandating behavior, and redistributing resources. In previous lessons, we've been learning a lot about economic policy. Now we're going to switch to a different topic, social policy. It's related to economic policy because it oftentimes requires the spending of money. But it's not just simply about trying to keep the economy going. Instead, it's trying to work on the society that we live in. Social policy can be defined as those things that concern the government using its power to coerce moral behavior. In other words, the government's trying to make people behave right. And there's several methods that the government can use to try to coerce, or in other words, sort of force people to behave the way that the government thinks they should. One of those methods can be seen in the example of people smoking marijuana. Still, through most of the United States of America, people just recreationally indulging in pot is still prohibited. Well, through the outline of marijuana, what the government is doing is it's trying to protect people from themselves. So when the government tries to protect some people from themselves by outlining the behavior that they're engaging in, what the government is doing, it is simply prohibiting a behavior that it considers to be wrong in some way. Now, you may disagree about whether people actually hurt themselves by smoking marijuana, but clearly the people that create these laws view this practice as harmful in some way to the people that do it, or perhaps harmful to others, harmful to society as the productivity is lost, or it causes people to drive while intoxicated in some way, whatever it may be. In some way, they find this practice to be harmful, and so they're going to just simply stop people from doing it by saying, no, 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 you're not allowed to do that thing. So this is one of the methods that the government can use to try to coerce people into behaving what they consider to be in a socially responsible way. The second method the government can use when it's coercing what it considers to be morally right behavior can be seen as we think about an automobile crash. When a crash takes place, somebody may well have been hurt, and who should pay? Well, I think most of us would say whoever it is that caused the crash. But unfortunately, there could be times when that person is not capable of paying for the harm that they've done. To prevent that sort of situation from happening, the governments of all the states require drivers within their states to have insurance in order to be able to legally drive. Well, now wait a minute. Why do they require people to have insurance? So that the person purchasing the insurance can help those that they may hurt if they get into an auto accident. So the government's trying to force them to be socially responsible here. The morally right thing for them to do is if they harm someone in an accident, they should have to pay for the harm that they did to that person. Now, since people may not necessarily take that responsible step of being prepared to compensate people they may have harmed, the government steps in and forces them to take that responsible step by requiring them to buy insurance. So this then gives us the second way that the government may coerce people into behaving in the way that they consider to be socially correct. The first one is they prohibit them from doing something. Now the second one, they require them, or in other words, mandate them to behave in a certain way. In this example, by getting them to buy car insurance. The third way that the government coerces people into behaving in a morally correct way from the government's point of view can be seen in the example of food stamps. Now, we've mentioned them before in this course, but in case you don't know, food stamps are some sort of certificate or mechanism. In some cases, it's like a credit card called an EBT card. It's some sort of way that a person can go into a business and purchase necessary items, usually food, at the government's expense. What they're doing when they provide food stamps is they are providing for the needy. Well, what does this have to do with coercing people into some sort of morally correct behavior? Well, ideally, it should be the taxpayers who are just being charitable on their own. These are the people the government ends up extracting the money from to provide for these programs. In an ideal world, the government would never have to do that. The people that have the money that could be used to help their fellow poor citizens would just do that out of the kindness of their own hearts, without the government ever needing to persuade them or force them to do so. But the government has decided that people aren't as generous as they should be. So the government's going to step in and force them to be generous, essentially. They're going to take taxes from them, and then they're going to turn around and distribute that to the poor. This is just simply a redistribution of resources. The government has decided that person A, who has the money, should have given it to person B, but they didn't. And so the government is going to make that transfer for them, whether they want to or not. So now then, what we see is that when engaging in social policy, the government may do any of these things. They may prohibit people from doing certain things that they otherwise would do. They may require people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. Or they may simply just take things from one person and give them to another. All right, now let's review what we learned in this lesson. What is social policy concerned with? Is it about making friends? Is it about making people behave correctly? Is it about entertaining people? Or is it about popular sovereignty? Social policy is about making people behave correctly, at least correctly in the view of the government. Outlawing marijuana is an example of what coercive method? Is it prohibiting behavior, mandating behavior, redistributing resources, or creating conflict? Outlawing marijuana is an example of prohibiting behavior. One of the ways that the government tries to coerce us, or in other words, force us into behaving the right way. Auto insurance laws are an example of what coercive method? Are they about prohibiting behavior, or mandating behavior, or redistributing resources, or creating conflict? Auto insurance laws are ways that behavior is mandated by the government. They feel that people should be behaving in a certain responsible way, and they're going to force them to do it, whether they want to or not. By mandating, in other words, requiring that they do the correct behavior. Food stamps are an example of what coercive method? Prohibiting behavior, mandating behavior, or redistributing resources, or creating conflict. Food stamps are an example of redistributing resources. Ideally, in a perfect, morally upright world, the government believes that private citizens would just be charitably sharing their extra income with the poor, but they're not. So the government's going to step in and make them do it. All right, that completes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 11. It'll be Lesson 12 about social security.